Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the MBE Enterprise Podcast, where we talk about money, business, and entrepreneurship with some of the brightest minds I know. Today, I am joined by founder of Epiblock, Asher Anderson. Asher, how are we doing this evening?
Really great. Thank you for having me, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I appreciate you asking, and I'm excited for this episode, Asher. To start out, I really want to get into kind of the origins of Epiblock. I had Caroline Anderson on as well, which is one of your co-founders. But I want you to kind of take me back right away to the very beginning. Where did this idea start? How did it kind of develop? You obviously brought on a couple of co-founders, and then kind of where is it at now?
Right. Yeah, great question. So I've personally suffered with chronic nosebleeds my entire life, and the current products on the market weren't really doing it for me. So I started studying the vasculature of the nasal cavity, which is just this general area right here. And I realized that there is major blood arteries within this area. And one day I was like, what would happen if I started to pressurize those arteries during one of my active nosebleeds? And just to give you some context, my nosebleeds are, they're super bad. I've had them forever. They lasted about, 10 to 20 minutes. One time I even passed out once because of too much blood loss. So I've had a lot of experience with nosebleeds, and I developed I just really hate them so much. So one day I kind of wanted to figure out what I could personally do to make my life easier dealing with nosebleeds. So again, I started studying the vasculature. I realized that there's major blood arteries right here, and I wanted to block them. So I started to make some silicone prototypes, and I learned how to do that off YouTube. So I made a little workstation down in my parents' basement. I made some prototypes, and I wanted to test it, but that meant I needed a very bad nosebleed. So I positioned a fan to blow right in my face while I slept that night, so I can get a guaranteed nosebleed in the morning every time. It would basically just dry out my nose, and that's kind of like the opportunity where I could test to see how long I could stop my nosebleed with my device. So I did a couple runs just using tissues at first, and then I used the device, and I noticed a huge reduction in time using the device I made. And then ever since, I noticed that I contacted my uncle. He's a plastic surgeon, and he does a lot of work on the face. And I just simply asked him, like, why is this happening? I know he's familiar with the vasculature in the face. And he was like, yep, you're blocking, the major blood arteries, the blood that feeds up to your nose. And that's basically, why it's taking so much less time to stop your nosebleeds now. I could keep talking about this forever, but that's kind of how it started.
About what age was that, Asher? You mentioned, I'm guessing was it high school?
Yeah, high school, that's when I started to craft the idea, but I personally suffered with nosebleeds my entire life. I think it was in 2019 where I started, thinking about this idea.
Okay, yeah. So that would have been probably like roughly your junior year of high school, something like that. Did
Right.
did you know throughout your whole life that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was that something that was always on your mind as a career path, or was it just totally something that stemmed from having this problem and then just being so fed up with it that you decided you had to find a way to solve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in high school, that's when I started to really know I wanted to have my own business. This was the time my parents started their own business too. So they both quit their full-time jobs and they opened up a indoor cycling studio. And I personally learned a lot of things from them. And that kind of really sparked my interest in owning a business. And additionally, I took my first entrepreneurship class in high school too as a junior, and my buddies and I um, did that. And we also did DECA in high school, the business club. And we gained a lot of experience from that. So I would definitely say junior year of high school, senior year, that's when I knew I wanted to start my own business. I really developed a passion for entrepreneurship.
Was there a specific moment, whether it was while you were still kind of deciding whether entrepreneurship was for you, or maybe even after you'd begun your research and your testing with Epiblock? Was there a moment where it kind of solidified for you that was like, yeah, this is the path that I should be on, like this is what I should be doing? Anything like that at all?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when I started crafting my own prototypes, I just thought that was very fun, and, also just solving like a personal issue I've had for so long. It was just really fun working on it. Um, I guess that was kind of the point I knew I wanted to, stick with Epiblock and see how far I could make it. A lot of it was just pure enjoyment. I didn't really have an intention actually to start my own business with Epiblock. It was just kind of like, how can I make my life easier with this? And then I was like, maybe I could turn this idea into a business. And, that's where kind of am right now.
So now with Epiblock, you have a couple of co-founders, Caroline, whom I had on, and then also Colin, who I plan to have on in the future. The idea of kind of the solopreneur and starting it yourself, you obviously did start Epiblock yourself, and then you eventually decided, to add on these team members. What would you say as far as some of the, maybe pros and cons of doing it solo at the beginning versus having the additional team members to help? Was there any particular reasons you brought them on? Did you just notice that they'd be good fits individually, or kind of take us through that decision-making process a little bit, Asher?
Right. So, as said before, it was just a personal issue I've had, and that kind of just made me want to solve it by myself at first. Again, I didn't really have the intention in turning it to a business. So, it was kind of like, a hobby at first. Finding problems I could solve was just very fun for me. But at the same time, it was very difficult doing it by myself because a lot of this stuff, you need medical expertise. You need to know, the vasculature of the face, where the arteries are, how blood flow works. And I've never had any medical expertise. I'm an entrepreneurship major, so that was difficult figuring out at first. Um, and once the idea started gaining some traction, I definitely needed more help after the Fowler competition in 2020 that I did. We started to pick up a lot of traction, and that's where a lot of the scary work started coming in, like trying to patent the idea, you know, do some testing to show efficacy of the device, and just doing that alone was very difficult. And I actually took a huge break from it in 2020 for about 2 years, just because it was so difficult for me to work on a medical device. But during those 2 to 3 years where I was not working for it, I was actually trying to find a teammate during that time, and that's where I met Colin and Caroline in my entrepreneurship class about 8 months ago. Seemed like great people at the start. We worked on a couple other business ideas in the class. I really liked them. Synergized together really well, and then I offered them, an opportunity to work on Epiblock, and ever since that, everything has been extremely good. So, my personal opinion, I think a lot of these businesses start from someone's, personal issue. They work on it for a while. Maybe they realize, it's very difficult to work on it by yourself, and then you realize you really need a team to speed things up, and to find others who just have, a diverse or just different expertise than you do.
You mentioned the Fowler competition before you took that break. For those people listening that don't know what that is, could you kind of take us through that a little bit, and what you were exactly competing in with that?
Yeah, so the Fowler competition is a annual business competition St. Thomas has every year, and this is where you submit your business idea you have. It doesn't need to be extremely developed or anything. And this is just basically where you submit, a paper submission of what your business idea is. And then if you're chosen to go to the semifinals, you give a PowerPoint presentation on your business, explaining the story, problem, solution, market, whatever. And you can win scholarships if you do very well. And you also get a lot of advice from the business experts here. And that was my intention to come in. How could I, use others people's help to further improve Epiblock? I did it as I think I did it as a sophomore. Yeah, so I wasn't so knowledgeable in entrepreneurship at that time. So I thought that was a very good opportunity um, to see what I could learn from that competition, just because, I knew this is an opportunity I can't miss. It was really fun. I highly recommend, anyone who's at St. Thomas to do that if they have a business idea.
You mentioned that you viewed it personally as an opportunity to learn. And I think that's extremely important, an important outlook to have on things such as that. What would you say to prospective entrepreneurs who maybe view that sort of thing as an opportunity for failure instead of an opportunity to learn? Because you certainly could have looked at it like that, like, oh, this is a competition, it's a business competition. I could enter my idea in, but that would open my idea up to critique and, ridicule and potentially, failing, not winning the competition. So the idea of viewing that from the perspective of purely as a learning opportunity is extremely valuable and an extremely intellectual and smart way to approach it. What would you say to entrepreneurs who might be looking too much through the lens of failure and not enough through the lens of, learning and the opportunities behind it?
Right. So just to give you a little context, when I was looking at the Fowler competition, I knew there were, big prizes. I knew I could fail. This was my first ever competitions at St. Thomas too, so I didn't really expect to do well at all. But it's just so important to realize, you have to use your resources at your school, especially if you're trying to, build your business. I did not have the intention at all to try to win it all. Like, the money is nice and stuff, but the connections you get from the competitions are definitely a lot more important. Um, I guess it's so important for us to embrace the failure. I've failed way too many times, and I've almost wanted to give up so many times, but that's how you learn. That's how you become a stronger person. That's how you make your business a lot stronger. No one has a perfect business at the start. It's just, headaches, trial and error, a lot of it. But that's just something you should definitely expect and want to do, actually. Like, you want to experience failure. It's only going to help your business grow. And that's just kind of how I also perceived this competition. I expected myself to fail. Luckily, I didn't. I actually won the Fowler competition. That was probably one of the happiest moments of my life, honestly, just to see a device I made, straight out of my parents' business, won a competition when I was a sophomore. But again, if anyone's trying to, enter a competition with their business idea, just go in there to learn from the mentors, learn from the faculty at St. Thomas. It's going to be very difficult to, talk to them after you graduate. Their time is money after that when you're not a student anymore. And that's what I understood as a sophomore. So use your time wisely in college, embrace the failure with your business, and try to just use as many resources as you can.
You spoke to a really important point right there. Well, there was a few, but one that I especially latched onto that I had actually heard mentioned prior is the idea of, the mentorship aspect, but really connecting with and using those resources that you have in college, because their time is money, once you're not a student, right? It's harder to connect with them. And I had a previous guest bring that up as well about how, the idea of the mentors that college, university allows you access to as far as entrepreneurship goes, if you're a major in that regard, where, having a strong network is extremely important. it's really important to take advantage of that and not just, be like, oh, I'm an entrepreneurship major, I'm here for just purely the classes, right? And this could apply to really any major as well. You're not just there for the classes, you're also there for the connections that you can make along the way. And speaking on the topic of mentorship, you talk about, teamwork, how that's extremely important to have team members who have maybe complementary skill sets to you, areas of expertise that you maybe don't have, or just, are equally as passionate about a project as you are. What can you say about the role of mentorship alternatively in your life, and kind of the role that's played maybe just in general growing up or throughout college, and then also particularly later on, kind of in the later life and later years of Epiblock here?
Yeah, I think mentorship just in general is so important. And I think a lot of us maybe don't understand that we take pride in doing work ourselves. Like maybe, this guy's not going to be helpful. I can just do it by myself. I know I'm the best at this. And, that mindset is not something you want to have. It's so important to seek out those connections. Maybe if you think they're not the right person, just talk to them still. But definitely, in my personal life, my parents have definitely mentored me with, entrepreneurship with their business, and I learned a lot from them. I've seen them fail so many times, and that's also another important part. Just make sure to embrace that failure. You're going to learn a lot from it. You're going to use it a lot in the future. And just in the early stages of Epiblock, that was one of my mistakes. I should have made more connections and found a mentor a lot earlier, because I had the mindset of just wanting to do everything myself. I thought I was, the perfect person to do this business just because, I've had probably a lot more experience than anyone else with nosebleeds. And then after the Fowler competition, as I mentioned before, everything just started to become really difficult with the intellectual property, making sure no one, steals the idea, showing the efficacy of the device, using, medical tools to show the efficacy of the device. I had no idea how to do that. And that's kind of where I realized, like, I need a mentor, I need other teammates. And I actually did. Find a mentor, 2 weeks after the Fowler competition. And that was probably one of the smartest decisions I've ever made in my life with Epiblock. It's just so important to have, different people's perspectives on your own business. They'll give you new ideas that you've never thought about, and it'll really start, improving your business that you've never thought that would happen before. So definitely, in my opinion, finding a mentor right away for your business is probably one of the most important things you could do starting out.
What are some of the most critical aspects and qualities that you think make a good mentor in your experiences with mentors? What are some of those things they do that really help you the most and maybe provide the most feedback to you as you work through your business and just life in general?
I think a lot of this has to do just being persistent, like having those weekly meetings with them, those checkups. It's just so important to be persistent when developing a business. I mean, again, in 2020, I took a huge break, 2 years from it. And um, it's just, if I would have been persistent by then, I feel like I could have gotten a lot more work done. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. They'll say, I'm going to work on this week, or I'm going to plan to get this done this month. And, they don't. And a lot of it just has to do with just being persistent, actually getting in your space, doing the work. Just someone who understands that general attribute of just being persistent in the business is very important to find. Also, someone who's also passionate about your idea, I guess, and the problem you're solving. If someone's not passionate about working with you, I think it's probably going to end up as a failure. Um, and that was one of the reasons why it took me a very long time to find two other people to work with me. I needed someone passionate about this problem, someone who could, think creatively how we could, further improve this idea. Not all mentors are like that too. I probably talked to, at least 10 to 20 mentors, and I'm probably only working with a couple right now. So not all mentors are perfect. It's definitely something to look into to make sure you find the right partner also for a mentor.
Certainly, and one mentor, very likely that's perfect for you might not be perfect for someone else, right? The passions, the interests that they have will lie in different areas and different industries of business. So that definitely is obviously something to look into too, and maybe their areas of expertise as well. You brought up persistence and mentioned it a lot there. And one thing I'd like to add with that is not only the idea of staying persistent with an idea that you already have and working through those tough times, but also realizing that if you haven't stayed persistent in the past, and maybe like you, for in your case, for example, you took that 2 year break, right? Well,
Mhm.
you also could have looked at that situation and decided, I took 2 years off. It's someone else is probably going to do it now. It's too late. I didn't act on it. It's over. But instead having the mindset of, no, I'm going to start this back up again, right? Like, it's been a 2 year break. I understand I haven't made any progress, but there's nothing I can do about that now. And so if I didn't start then, but who cares, right? I'm going to start now and then stay persistent from now on, because you can't go back in time and change the fact, right? Like, it'd be pretty beneficial if you'd have started 2 years prior, stuck with it, right? You'd be 2 years further ahead. And certainly that's beneficial, and it's something that people can look back on and be like, kind of woe is me sort of attitude, right? Of like, oh, I didn't do it. But at the end of the day, you can't change it. So what you can do is, start today and continue moving forward like you have. So I think that's extremely just great that you picked up on it. And I think a lot of people let ideas go to waste and then think that they can't pick up on it because they've, didn't act on it for that period of time for whatever reason. And another thing that you talked about within that was the idea of getting a mentor, because the medical device area was an area that you didn't really have a lot of expertise in. Um, what are some of the specific things and aspects that your mentors and maybe your teammates helped you with right away in that area? Because within entrepreneurship, I think people can have an entrepreneurial mindset of like, I'm a problem solver. I have initiative and drive. I want to create things from scratch, right? Not necessarily just do a repetitive task over and over. I may be a jack of all trades. Like, I have skills in different areas and I don't want to specialize. But if you have a really good idea objectively, but you don't have an area of expertise in, say, medical devices, for example, you can think, oh, well, I can't act on this, even though I think it's a good idea. I can't act on it because I don't have that knowledge. And that's where obviously connections, networking, business partners, mentors comes in. So what were kind of some of the main areas that you think, well, not think, that they were most beneficial with as far as that kind of medical space goes?
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff they recommended to do was just customer discovery and asking, physicians and doctors about the device, and that's something I was hesitant to do before. I didn't really like reach out to other people. I thought like I knew what I was doing was perfect, and they were like, you have to make sure you run this device down, by other physicians who also see nosebleeds every day. For example, like in the emergency room. For example, about 7 million people, I never knew this before, and this is kind of like what I learned from my mentors. Once you do customer discovery, you just start learning things you've never thought about before. But 7 million people go to the emergency room each year just for your nosebleeds. And I was just mind blown by that number, because I was just focusing on the consumer market, just selling this thing on Amazon. How could I get into like Walgreens, CVS, stuff like that? And I was just running the device down by other physicians and doctors. And they were like, yeah, there lacks innovation in the emergency room to treat nosebleeds. And they really liked the device as well when I was talking to them. And that kind of just made me have a completely different mindset in terms of how the business, would be operated, how it would work. So that point, I was like, the opportunity is not on the consumer market. It's all in the emergency rooms based on the conversations I've had with physicians. And that's when my mentors also said, talk to patients who went in the emergency room for nosebleeds, look online for like nosebleed forums, and just seeing what, physicians and patients have to say about nosebleeds. And I guess that really um, made me think differently. It's so important to reach out to as many as people as possible to understand the problem you're actually trying to solve. That was definitely one of the most or the best advices the mentors gave me.
Going into problem solving and attacking a problem while having a lot of data, right? That's essentially what customer feedback is getting you data on the subject and providing you with a better outlook of the landscape of what the issue looks like. That's always going to be, beneficial. And it sounds so obvious always, like ask the customers, right? But I I found that it's a very common theme, and what the entrepreneurs say, is beneficial to them, even in finding the idea. Right? There's people out there who want to be entrepreneurs, and they don't. They maybe know they have the mindset, but they don't have a product or a service yet that they're working on. They're trying to find one, and one thing that people always say is just start with an area you have some knowledge in. It's always a good start, but then B is just start talking to people and figuring out what problems they have, right? Or if you already have kind of a niche area picked out, well, talk to more people in that niche and figure out what bigger and bigger issues are, or what recurring issues are that everyone seems to have. And that gives you a pretty good start as far as the business idea goes. I think the ideation process of entrepreneurship is one that can be tricky, in the sense that I think there's a lot of people out there that would maybe consider themselves stuck, and unable to find the idea that they think really fits them, or really have a lot of impact on the world, or make a lot of money in a sense. And I think just kind of customer feedback, but even before they're customers, right? So essentially just market research is so extremely important in that ideation process, not only once you're along the lines, once you're already down the road, excuse me, and have customers and are getting the feedback there, but even just when you're starting out, conducting that thorough market research that your mentors told you is extremely, extremely important. Asher, where is, I think I asked this at the beginning and we kind of trailed off into the past, but where's Epiblock actually at currently, as far as operations, or, pitching to, investors, that sort of thing? What's kind of been going on recently with Epiblock?
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff that's happened with Epiblock. So about 6 months ago, we did eFest, which was one of the largest undergraduate entrepreneurship competitions in the nation. And we did very well in that competition, which got us a lot of seed funding for Epiblock. That allowed us to make more or improved prototypes. And we did a little more testing with those to show the efficacy of the device, how it reduces blood flow within the face, how it shortens artery diameter. We could not do that before just because we didn't have the funds or the correct prototype to use. And that competition also allowed us to connect us with investors, mentors, so that really started speeding up things. One big thing we do have coming up, we're actually working closely with a very large medical device distributor here. And this is our opportunity to send them prototypes. They're going to give it to their sales reps. They're going to send our prototypes to hospitals around the nation. And that's going to allow us to get feedback from physicians about the device, how they like it, how we can improve it, just sort of stuff like that. Then also, more exciting news, we got selected as one of the 12 emerging technologies coming from the Mayo Clinic and biomedical companies affiliated with Medical Alley here in Minnesota. So that means we're actually partnering with St. John's and St. Ben's University starting in late October. And we're going to have a team of 4 undergraduate students, 1 master's student, a team of professors and faculty from St. John's and St. Ben's. And they're going to be working on some project guidelines and deliverables we have crafted for them. And they're going to be donating about 750 hours of their time and expertise to help Epiblock for about 4 or 5 months. So that's really exciting for us. This is, also where we're going to find other people that have expertise we don't have. So that's really going to speed things up. As I said before, Caroline, Colin, and I we're just entrepreneurship majors, so we lack that medical expertise. And we know St. John's and St. Ben's has more of those skill sets that we don't have, and it's just going to be great, working with other students that like working on startups, and also a team of professors and faculty. It's going to be a really great opportunity for Epiblock that we're just really fortunate to have.
Certainly. Wow. Well, congratulations on that. First of all, it's a extremely a prestigious honor, and also an extremely great opportunity for you guys going forward, like you mentioned. Asher, how are you kind of approaching that from the mindset of going into it? And what are some things that, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, what are some things that you think will help you get the most out of it, as far as the ways that you can approach it and best look at this as an opportunity for growth, and maybe questions you might ask, or specific areas that you're looking to improve through this? I know you mentioned the idea that you guys have the entrepreneurship background side of things, and you maybe are looking to get more information on maybe the medical side of things, or anything in that. How are you kind of approaching this opportunity?
Right. So it's also going to be a big learning experience for me. I mean, just managing, 5 other students and professors and faculty is something I've never done before. So we're also the youngest team ever to be a part of this program. So it's kind of scary for myself as the team leader to manage everyone, make the right project guidelines to give them. We crafted several things in terms of, how we're going to market the device, how we're going to test the device. We need to conduct a research study. And these are all things that, Colin, Caroline, and I, wrote down in a document for the students and professors to work on. So approaching this opportunity, it's also a learning experience for me. How do I manage, people working on my idea, making sure, they're having a good time working on it. If they're, providing value to this business, what do you do if they're not doing a good job? Just all sorts of things like that. It's definitely going to be a lot to do on how to be a good leader here. Other than that, it's just exciting working with them. I'm sure there's other things, I could, also improve on, just how to work well within a team. I guess that's kind of like a hard question. I'll just have to see when I start working with them.
No, certainly it's a more difficult question, but I think you really hit the nail on the head there, though, honestly, with that answer. And the idea of it provides you with a great opportunity, learning how to kind of manage those people, right? And manage people that are, kind of directly working for you on this project, right? Like, you are guiding them on what you would want them to do, and they're working on it. And I think that idea is something, that concept is something, you mentioned leadership, that's extremely, maybe not as critical right away, because a lot of entrepreneurs maybe are starting on their own. If they're starting on their own, team aspect is obviously changes things. But the idea of shifting from the mindset of, okay, I'm going to do everything and I know what needs to get done, and storing it kind of all in my head, and knowing what I need to do, versus, okay, now I have you had co-founders before, but I have a team of people that are working like under me, and, as opposed to kind of with me, and figuring out how to, divvy out roles for them, and what jobs and tasks would be best for them to do, and which ones are still best for me to do myself, and not delegate. I think that'll be a very great experience for you, and awesome opportunity, and just one to take advantage of, like you have in the past, obviously, with those learning opportunities, and just wishing you the best going forward with that. You mentioned also that you guys were getting prototypes out to hospitals. How many is that you're putting out there? Because that's obviously a big development, like you said as well.
Yeah, we're not totally sure on the amount of hospitals prototypes are going to be given out to, but just based on the conversations we've had with the distributor, they said just send us prototypes. We will give it to all our sales reps, and they'll show them to hospitals around the nation. We didn't get a specific number on that, but it definitely should be a good chunk for us to really understand how physicians like the device.
Definitely get that, like we mentioned before, the increased data, you could just to learn from it and apply that feedback to it for the future. So that's obviously incredible as well, Asher. And turning the page back here a little bit again, I want to step away from Epiblock a little bit and more to just Asher Anderson, right? Was there an idea, or what was maybe the first entrepreneurship idea that you ever had growing up in your life, or was it Epiblock?
Gosh, that's a good question. Let me think here. Probably, it probably started in high school where one of my good friends and I, we both really love cars. We love washing cars. Um, oh yeah, so back in I think it was 2016 or 2017, when my parents owned the indoor cycling studio, we wanted to do a little car wash business while people were taking their indoor cycling class. So we, told the clients, while you're taking your cycling class, would you like your car wash during the meantime? And right when you're done, you have a nice, fresh, clean car waiting for you outside. And I think that was kind of the first business idea we had, just something fun on the side. But that's definitely how we learned a lot, how to, talk to customers, deliver a quality service to them, and how to just manage that operation. And after that, my buddies and I had a business idea while we did DECA. It was called Quick Wash. It was a college laundry service where we would take college students' laundry. They would just put all their laundry in a mesh bag outside their dorm room. And then we'd take them, wash it for them, and we'd deliver it back to their dorm room. So that was another idea we had, and we actually did pretty well with that idea in DECA. But unfortunately, the year after, my first year at St. Thomas, there was a business idea that came out that St. Thomas already had too that just got developed. It was like the identical business idea, so we couldn't do that. If that was an idea, we'd probably be doing that right now just because it seemed like a pretty fun idea that no one else was doing at the time. But I've had other business ideas too. This one was a pretty big failure. So I had this idea of making a UFO sled. It was basically a disc sled with lights under it. So when you were sledding in the dark, it looked like a UFO sliding down a hill, and you could change the colors and stuff. And I was speaking closely to manufacturers in China for this thing to be made. And that's when I realized, well, how often do people actually sled in the dark? And just the market wasn't big enough, but it was definitely a great learning experience a long time ago. So I think in total, I've probably had 4 business ideas, including Epiblock, and only one of them has really worked.
Would you say 4 business ideas that you have kind of actually put time and effort into? As far as just purely the idea, have you ever had an idea that you maybe thought of, crossed your mind, and you were like, oh, this would be good, and then never gave it another thought really, that you maybe wish you would have acted on in the past, or in the future, or nothing like that in particular?
I've definitely had business ideas I've thought of in the past that I haven't pursued. Maybe just because I wasn't so interested in it. But the ones that I did mention, they just sounded like a really fun idea. And typically what happens, I'll just like make a little prototype. Like with the UFO sled, I thought of it right away and I made a prototype in a day. The Epiblock, I thought of it, and I made a prototype in the day. It's usually the ones that involve like a physical product, just because I do like making stuff at home. But yeah, there's definitely been other business ideas. I can't think of them off the top of my head. But those four ones that I mentioned were the ones that actually put a little bit of time in. Obviously, Epiblock is the business idea that I put the most time in, but everything else I tried.
One thing you brought up there was the idea that you maybe would think of the idea, but if you weren't super interested in it, you'd move on. You wouldn't pursue it. How important would you say that interest, that kind of passion, that really just that in that field or in that area, how important would you say that is to starting a company, or those people who may be interested in getting into entrepreneurship purely to make money, right? That's a common theme, because of the theoretical unlimited earning potential of entrepreneurship, right? You don't have a boss directly over you, but it seems that they're less likely to succeed when they're just purely approaching it from the financial aspect, as opposed to when they're really truly trying to solve a problem that maybe has affected them or someone they've known. What are kind of your thoughts on how much of a role passion and interest play?
Yeah, I think that might be one of the most important aspects when starting a business, just how passionate you are about, solving a problem or whatever you're doing. And that just kind of showed why the other business ideas I had didn't do so well, just because I wasn't so passionate about it. Maybe you like it for like a week or two, then after that you get pretty bored of it. But I always tell that, to other people, other young people who want to start their own business, make sure you're actually very passionate about this idea. Make sure you've had experience with this, that you've been thinking about it for a while. I think passion is really, one of the backbones of a business idea a lot of people have, just because when someone is very passionate about their business, that also means they just have a great story that sells it. And that's just something else I learned with, business competitions. A lot of the judges really want to hear the story of how you came up with the idea. And that just shows, this person's actually dedicated working onto the business. They're serious about it. If I give them, the funding in the future, they're going to trust them. Yeah, they're actually going to use it on it, just because they can see how they're so passionate, with the idea. I've always wanted to do something that I really enjoy, that I had a passion for. Definitely Epiblock is one of those ideas, just because, suffered with the problem my whole life. I do like making like my own things. I try to be handy at home, try to fix things myself instead of, others helping or calling like someone to come in to fix things, make things, whatever. Um, but yeah, that's just a really great question in my opinion. Passion is definitely, in my opinion, probably the most important thing when starting out a business.
I think you gave an interesting and important take on the judge side of things, right? Or even investor side of things, of that story really behind it. And if you have a story that most people might think, um, that doesn't really matter that much, or like, it doesn't matter how you got there. It more so just matters that you got there, I guess. And that is true to a certain extent. But when you're talking about investor money or competition judges, for example, I think that is a pretty good point of, if they can see how connected you are to this problem that your company, your business is solving, it can honestly be a pretty good indicator of how likely you are to maybe succeed in the future, or at least stick with it, and how long you will be willing to chase that business, or that dream essentially of owning that business, before eventually it would fail, if it was failing and didn't succeed. I think that's a interesting point. I never really have thought of that. I'm a very analytical numbers person myself. To me, it's kind of like, okay, if the business financially, if it checks out, it checks out, right? If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know what I mean? But that really almost finding a way to quantify something that's unquantifiable, right? You can't really quantify the amount of passion someone has behind a project, but if you're able to really kind of read their story and read them, I guess, as they're telling you their story, it can kind of give you an idea of just how really tied to that company they are, or at least, maybe it's an imperfect system, but it's interesting way of looking at it for sure that I had never really kind of thought about. So it's cool. That's why I have these conversations. It brings up interesting concepts like that. And speaking of passion, Asher, was there ever a situation or a time in Epiblock's life where passion really saved the day, like where it was really looking like, this is not looking good, but at the end of the day, your passion and your drive to succeed with it really made the difference in keeping it alive?
Yeah, during the prototype development stage, when I was in my parents' basement, just learning how to do silicone molding, making, prototypes, this is where it really started to kick in. I was always like pretty like handy, and I like making my own things. So I really wanted to build something really badly. So that same day I went to Home Depot, bought some random silicone stuff, and just started mixing things in my basement and seeing how it, turn out to be. And the moment, the next morning when the silicone cured, that was just so exciting to see that actually made like a molded silicone, prototype. And just the satisfaction I got of just like making something that's actually functional is super cool to me. And also just wanting to test it really badly. Like a lot of people do think I'm crazy for, giving myself nosebleeds. I gave myself nosebleeds every day for about 2 months, where I just, position the fan to blow right in my face at night to just dry out my nose completely. But it was just so exciting for me in the morning to test it, just because I knew it was working. It was actually doing something, and I literally did not care that, you know, I was having the worst nosebleeds ever. That was the opportunity where I got my phone out, started timing everything, tried to find the average between, just using tissues and using my prototypes. Just the prototypes reduced the amount of time by 80 to 90% every single time. For example, my nosebleeds typically lasted between, 10 to 20 minutes just using tissues. And every single time using the prototype, I could get it down to 30 seconds to a max of 2 minutes every single time. And it was just mind blowing to me. And that's when the passion, just really started kicking in. Like, this thing actually works. I've never heard of it. I think this should have been invented years ago. Um, and just the moment I, was telling my uncle about it, and he was telling me, yeah, that's actually working. You're pressurizing an artery within your vasculature, reducing blood flow. It's a thing, and you can make it into a product. And I forgot to mention this. It's not just used for nosebleeds. You can use it for facial surgeries. You can use it for cosmetic procedures. For example, if you're getting dermal filler injections on the nasolabial fold, which is just basically your smile line, or getting dermal filler injections in your lips, you can also put the device on. It shortens the artery temporarily. So when a surgeon or when a physician is injecting dermal fillers into your face, there's a slight chance of them accidentally hitting one of those arteries. And if that happens, that can lead to, blindness, tissue necrosis, even death in some severe situations. And that's just a whole other market, Epiblock can be used in. And that got me really excited, because that makes, the nosebleed market just extremely small. You know, nosebleed markets is, a multi-million-dollar industry. It's worth about $350 million in the US. And just, with cosmetic procedures alone, that's a multi-billion-dollar industry. and there's nothing being used to prevent that issue from happening, just an accidental injection into an artery. And that was just getting me really excited. Um, just knowing that I can solve a problem with a product I made was just, super exciting for me. And that just kept making me work harder. But yeah.
So with, like you mentioned, the idea of shrinking those arteries temporarily, right? Or kind of pressurizing, blocking them off in a way. Are there, I'm sure, was there like safety concerns ever along the way, or like certain safety things that you had to address with that? Is that part of kind of the process of Epiblock that in its history or going forward?
Yeah, totally, for sure. So it is a medical device, so you have to comply with, regulatory things. It's just a huge headache figuring all that out. But based on conversations we've had with other, nurses that do inject dermal fillers and surgeons and stuff, but you want to make sure you don't want to completely cut off blood flow like a tourniquet, just because you need blood supply in your face area. It supplies blood to your eyes and your brain. You do not want to shut it off. So one of the things we had to make sure to do is to reduce blood flow and reduce artery diameter to a minimal amount, just enough to make a difference in shortening the artery or reducing blood flow. That was one thing we were struggling on for a while. We didn't want too much pressure on the arteries and in just the tissue. We didn't want too little. It was really difficult finding the right amount of pressure, and that's something that definitely did take a long time during the prototype development stage. Um, the way we do the way we reduce blood flow and artery diameter is using magnetic force from neodymium magnets, which are one of the strongest magnets in the world. So it was difficult finding the right magnets to use. You didn't want to use ones that were too strong, not strong enough. But fortunately, there's a lot of literature on using neodymium magnets to reduce blood flow and artery diameter. Magnets are used all the time in healthcare procedures. That's something I didn't know before. All I wanted to do is just try to pressure my artery using pressure, and I thought magnets would um, do well. So definitely one of the biggest safety precautions was making sure, we're not applying too much pressure to the face.
How were you guys testing that? Were you like set up in a testing facility somewhere, or was it just kind of trial and error with on yourselves or on you particularly?
Yeah, so at first I was just doing it on myself. It was pretty it was kind of strange at the start because we would buy different magnets off of Amazon and we'd put it, in our mouth, and some of them would hurt very badly and some of them didn't apply enough pressure. Then we also realized when you cover the magnet and the silicone we use, so it's not a raw magnet in your mouth, it's our device is made with a medical grade silicone with neodymium magnets inside, just so, you know, you don't swallow a magnet accidentally, and it would just be too painful to have magnets, just magnets themselves in your mouth. But we did a lot of testing on ourselves at first, and then we sent prototypes to my uncle using a Doppler ultrasound device. A Doppler ultrasound device is basically like an X-ray, but for blood vessels, so you can see how much blood is actually flowing through the arteries. And we sent him lots of prototypes, and he helped us figure out which ones actually reduce blood flow to a minimal amount. And that's kind of how we figured out, this magnet is the right strength to use. We'll use this one, but we're definitely not done yet in terms of testing, because we do want to conduct a research study on our device. But we're pretty confident we have the right strength down right now.
Along this whole process, Asher, and kind of your entrepreneurial journey as a whole, what's one thing you wish maybe it's from a mindset perspective or from an actual business perspective, what's one thing you wish you would have known right away that you've maybe learned now? I know we talked about kind of perseverance. We talked about the idea of getting a mentor, I should say. But besides those, what's something else that you kind of has been pivotal and critical to your success that you wish you would have known right away in a perfect world?
Gosh, besides finding a mentor, I would just try. I used to be a very shy, mellow person, very introverted back then, and that made me not really want to, talk to others, do the customer discovery and stuff. I just kind of like doing stuff by myself. I think one of the best things you can do right away is just start talking to people, understanding your problem, who else suffers from this, or who else would give you some good advice on your idea. And I really started to establish these connections probably sophomore or junior year, which is honestly kind of embarrassing to say because I could have gotten a lot more stuff done back then, especially in 2019 when I just started crafting the idea. So I would just say make sure, talk to other people, see what they have to say about it. That's going to lead you into the right direction, just because, you want to just understand what others have to say about your business. You can't do something completely alone. You need a team. You need to do customer discovery. That's how you're going to really understand the problem you're trying to solve.
How about for your advice for future entrepreneurs on an essential quality, your opinion of an essential quality or an essential skill that you think is extremely applicable and perhaps necessary for entrepreneurship?
I would just say having the mindset of accepting failure and understanding the key to success here is failure, honestly. That's what my dad has personally told me all my life. Failure is just so important. Don't be ashamed by it. Be proud of failing, but make sure you just don't give up. Um, use the failure to further improve, your business. I've personally, have failed with Epiblock too many times. I personally wanted to give up with Epiblock too many times. But once you have the mindset of just knowing like you are going to fail and it's going to happen 100%, not just one time, it's going to happen many, many times, you're going to have a way better time of, um, building the foundation of your business, because at the start it is very difficult and you may think like, yeah, I have a great story about it, I have experienced it my whole life, I've been thinking about it. You think you're going to be great at it. I personally think that's just, even if you have that much experience with it, it's going to be extremely difficult at the start. And just to cope with that, embrace the failure, and just take what you learned from that failure and um, use it well back into the business, figuring out ways how you could, further improve it.
Definitely. And you mentioned that it's extremely difficult and you have to know that it's going to be extremely difficult. What made you, I know we've kind of touched on this sort of, but you could just not pursue it, right? And it would be easier. It's extremely difficult to pursue it. What is it in you that gives you the drive and gives you the desire to continue pursuing it even when there are difficult days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would just say it just keeps revolving around this common theme here of just being passionate about the idea. I mean, if I wasn't having fun with it, if it wasn't a problem I wasn't passionate about, I would probably not pursue the business at all. Um, I think it's just, I think this one is just very simple to me. Make sure, you're passionate about it. If it's difficult, if something's difficult during the day, just know, like, if it was so easy, everyone else would be doing it. There's a reason why this is difficult right now. You know, yeah, I guess it's kind of my answer for that.
Yeah, well, and I think it's kind of that ability that you're talking about to push through and persevere, really, because there's a lot of people who are passionate about problems, Asher, that aren't building businesses to solve them. You know what I mean? So, like, there's something about the entrepreneurial spirit, right, that you clearly have that, pushes you through those difficulties. And you mentioned that you enjoy it, and that's a huge aspect of it too, right? There's obviously certain parts of it that you don't enjoy as much, I'm sure, but the idea of knowing that you're pushing forward and making progress and it's something that you are passionate about as a whole is obviously extremely important. And what you mentioned about failure as well, right? Of knowing that those failure is a step along the way, and it's multiple steps along the way. If it's a 100-step process, 75 of those steps are probably failure, right? So if you just look at it from the lens of, there's 1,000 steps for me to get to where I want to go. And every time I fail, I'm just taking one step forward. Well, then you're not looking at it as a setback and you're looking at it through the lens of taking a step forward. And I think that's an extremely important part of it too. Obviously within reason, right? If it's dumb failures that, are occurring due to not taking correct precautions or not setting up something adequately enough, then it's obviously there's within reason, right? But taking those calculated failures, failing in a calculated manner that's actually improving the business concept and taking steps forward as opposed to taking steps back, and then also viewing it as such are extremely important. Asher, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It was a super interesting conversation. I wish you the best of luck going forward with Epiblock. And thanks again, man.
Yes, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.